tools away from this conversation, implement them into your life, both as a leader, as a counterpart, as a colleague. You're going to be able to really dive into how do I extract more information, more quality information from these conversations that I have. I know many people have walked away from many conversations, whether it's in a networking group type of setting or even a business setting, a sales meeting, and there's a lot of surface conversation. We do a mile wide and don't get much past a foot deep. What I want to do through this conversation, through this series, is really arming you with the necessary tools for the battlefield of communication, connection, getting and revealing the motive, the context, and the character from the people that you're interacting with, and then ultimately being able to understand and identify, does this person align with me personally, professionally, financially? Are they able to truly integrate into what we're doing as a business or in my personal life in the context of culturally, are they aligned with where I am from a character standpoint? Operationally, do they function in a mannerism that is aligned with the way that I do it? Not necessarily that they do it the same way, but that they do it in a similar light, meaning their motive, the context of which they work from is similar. And then financially, are they able to work from the same center point that I work from? Meaning, if we're doing a job proposal, if it's in the business context, or are we building a budget for the family in that context? Are we working from the same center point? From a construction side of the house, are we working from the same plumb line? And so, as we navigate this conversation today and work our way through the series, my goal for you as a leader, as a business owner in your business, is to be able to have more powerful conversations, not only with your leadership team, but with everybody that you interact with, whether that is in the business or you're able to take these things home. I've been training and doing leadership training for the better part of a decade now. And one thing that I take away from each one of these, whether it's conversations or trainings that I do, it really comes down to these are lessons for life. If we can extract and have deeper connection, if we can extract more value, not only for ourselves, but for the people that we're having conversations with, we can walk away from each one of those conversations with more context, with greater gravity to that person, meaning there's a stickiness to that relationship. I know that as a person with a background in sales, I went to a lot of networking groups, a lot of these connector type of settings, and left disconnected. What I'd like to do through this conversation is really help give you the tools, the resources, and some extra arrows for your quiver, if you will, for you to not only engage in these conversations, but be able to walk away from them with greater sense of connectivity, connection, or actionability from your conversations. So as we jump in, um, brace yourself. We're going to get through a lot of information in a very short amount of time, but the goal is that we don't get through the information just for the sake of getting through it, but we get through it for the sake of walking away with actionable resources that you can take and start to implement in your daily and your personal life. So our topic for this series is really interview like your business depends on it, because it doesn't hurt to ask. If you were here with us the first part of this series, you know that this is based off of Trey Gowdy's connectivity and interview. He comes at it from a very legal side of the house, meaning he's an interrogation lawyer, he's a defense attorney by trade, but the things that he uses, the tools that he uses in his professional life are definitely things that over the last really 5 years or so, I've been able to marry these tools that Trey Gowdy has introduced to the market, as well as what we were teaching on the interview side, and really been able to connect these dots and bring these two business owners everywhere from really that million to about $50 million in revenue. And that's what I want to do for us today, is really continue to have these connection points. So I am a bit of a nerd in the sense that I use this stuff in my home. I use it with my kids. I use it with my spouse. I use it with friends and family. In many instances, they don't know what I'm doing until they know what I'm doing. I give you an example. My wife, Megan, she works in a dental practice. And there's a lot of moving, whether it's patients and information moving, or it's strategies and dental plans that they're wanting to push to the patients to get them in the best position that they can for their oral health. The difficult part is if there's no connectivity, people a lot of times can't connect what you're saying with the WIFM, what's in it for me. And so with this conversation, I really want to connect those dots and give you some real resources that you can take into these conversations. Again, the great thing about business is it doesn't matter if you're coming into this conversation from a construction side, a tech side, doesn't matter. It really does not matter what industry you're in, whether you're in any of those trades or industries. We're all in the people business. Our ability to move and shape our culture is our ability to lead people well. So let's jump in. So I want to start with interviewing for truth. Conversations, these need to reveal motive, context, and really produce an unearthed character. Um, a lot of times, as people that interview, we can get stuck in kind of the temptation to go off of a beautiful resume. As an interviewer, as a hiring manager, there is still, after 15 plus years, there's still a temptation to look at a resume and make an assessment. A resume shows you what somebody has done. Great interviews show why they do it, how they think, and what drives them when no one's watching. I think it's really important as we have these conversations, whether they're in one-on-ones and it's more of a conversation in nature, or it's interview, it typically takes a bent towards interrogation. We have either prepared or not prepared. Sometimes we have our questions. Sometimes we're winging it because I get the pushback from having interview questions already scripted and mapped out. With, if I wing it, I know it's going to be organic. I know it's going to be an authentic conversation. And what my pushback to that is, I can tell you that while it may be genuine and authentic, it's going to be unpredictable to both you and the person on the other side of that conversation. And it's largely not going to be able to be benchmarked against future conversations. I call this bad sushi, good steak interviewing. When your conversations are predicated on your previous experience, anybody that's been in these types of scenarios, you may have come into it right after lunch, you've had some really bad sushi. It doesn't matter how good of a candidate that person is, you can't focus on anything other than the stomach cramps from the bad sushi. They're going to be a bad candidate no matter what if you're not prepared. Same thing is true for good steak. Good steak interviewing, you come in after lunch, oh my goodness, just met with our best client. They just added another $2,500 in recurring revenue to their contract. This is awesome. I've got an interview, going in with no plan. And this could be the most ill-qualified person that you've ever met with, and somehow, some way, they are a great candidate. You end up hiring them, and they show up for the first day, and you can't even understand why they're there. I don't know about you, but I've had that experience, and so I have built processes on the back end of these to help me avoid this. Uh, so we don't just ask what happened, we ask why it happened, how they handled it, and who they were being when it happened. You're listening for mindset, not just actions. When you ask quality questions, it starts to unearth the things that are being not said or unsaid or unspoken, and in a Zoom type of environment that most of us are finding ourselves in, whether that's interviewing or leading whole teams, we have to be able to tease out these things out of our team, out of these conversations. So we're going to release the 3 P's on them. So we're going to want to understand the past. Tell me about a time when. This is setting up that question. Tell me about a time when you found yourself in XYZ situation. What happened? How'd you handle it? What I want to do with this is really understand where they are coming from, but then jump right into the process that got them there. How did you decide what to do? How did you decide when this happened that you were going to make this move? And then personal belief. What mattered most when you were in that situation? What did you learn from the scenario that we're talking about? I think it's really important that as we talk to people, we don't give answers in the form of a question and then ask for them to agree. Again, this is a very big interview, especially if we are high analyzer, high stabilizer personalities. It tends to be more of a temptation and tendency with those types of leaders where we find ourselves, hey, I've I've found myself doing this in these past scenarios. Have you found yourself doing the same thing in those scenarios? Yeah, every time. Oh man, that's a yes. We are aligned. You have to understand that everything that you have, i.e., a job, position, a role in your organization, is on the other side of them feeling like they're getting those answers correct. So the more we can set them up for success and really showing off and showing out their competencies for their ability to deliver on the objectives, the better we can understand and reveal those motives, gain context, and unveil or reveal their character for that role. So an example of a poor question in this scenario: have you managed people before? What's wrong with this question? I think this is a perfectly acceptable question in very low leadership type of interviews. Meaning, have you managed people before? If I had a show of hands, I would say anybody that's interviewing for a manager, supervisor role and they're looking to fill that has probably asked this question or something similar to it. The problem is that we're not actually requiring anything other than a yes, no, or maybe answer. So, have you managed people before? Yes. Where do we go from there? Because we just got the answer to our question. If you've spent any time with me in whether it's interview training or one-on-one training or crucial conversations, growth tracks, you will know that my question to open up a conversation, I don't care about the answer, because I'm not asking a question to get to an answer. I'm asking a question to open up a conversation to get to a question. I'll say that again because that can be a lot to unravel. I'm not asking a question to get the answer. I'm asking the question to start a conversation in order to ask a question to get an answer. So there's a lot of layers to that, but here's a great way of asking a question. Walk me through a time when you had to give tough feedback. What led up to it? How you handled it? And what you learned from that experience. So this is going back to last week's conversation where we're question stacking. We're stacking multiple questions, not that we're asking 4 questions in one question, because that is a temptation. We're going to ask first, walk me through a time you had to give tough feedback. How does that correlate with our poor question? Have you ever managed people? I can get a yes, no, maybe to that first question, but the second question is more powerful because it requires them to tell me how they manage people. And then what led up to it. Now I'm getting context for why they did the thing that they did. How did you handle that? Now I'm understanding more context between why, what, and how. And then what did you learn from that experience? Once they receive the feedback, how did they implement that? What was their next step coming out of that experience? This gives me an understanding of the quality of the leadership that they would provide an individual as I'm opening up or building out a department, or a team and taking over for a past either poor or strong leader. So I want to get context. I want to unravel that knot of confusion. How are they going to show up for my team moving forward? Listen for what's not said. There's power in the pause. I think it's really a skill that is underdeveloped in a lot of leaders, where we don't actually give ourselves permission to pause, to sit in silence. I've talked to it many times, but a lot of us as drivers, we are either high driver, we are dominant personality, or we're an influencer and we have that influential or storytelling mechanism to our personality. Silence is not comfortable. Do you feel that? There's power in the pause. I want us to come out of this conversation understanding the still, quiet voice, that hesitation. We want to listen for these pauses, these deflections, these over-talking moments. We can say more than the words themselves just in our silence, but then also learning to spot gaps, those shifts and energy drops make you a sharper judge of fit, that alignment, that ability to understand, can this person be successful in my environment? As we learn these tools, as we're looking for these new resources to really unpack a lot of the things, a lot of the environmental challenges that we find ourselves in, I'll tell you that our ability to lean into the discomfort is our ability to begin the process of creating a culture by design. I've had multiple conversations over the last 2 weeks, some coming out of last week's conversation, some very new conversations that are generated out of real world scenarios. And the great thing is that people are going to people. You can take that to the bank. That's as quality as a cashier's check. People are always going to be people. They are going to be equally unpredictable and predictable. The unpredictable people are the ones that we don't know. The predictable ones are the ones that we invest in and we know them. So what do you watch for in these pauses, these silent moments, these shifts in your people? We want to look pauses before answers. How intentional are their answers? Repeating the question. Do they have a skill for clarifying before executing? I'm reminded of a leader that I worked under a few years back, but she had the uncanny ability to unearth the expectations that really she was trying to drive at. And so one of the things that she would utilize, probably better than most individuals that I've ever either worked under or worked beside, but she would rephrase the question the way that she heard it right back to the person. 8 times out of 10, if she had worked with the person before, she could pretty much mimic the question in different wording to get more clarity. But on the other side of that, there were times where we were working together and she would share an expectation, I would restate the expectation, and then we'd find clarity in the middle there. But you want to understand, is this person going to be jumping to conclusions and not asking clarifying questions? It reminds me of the scene from one of my favorite movies, Dumb and Dumber, where he didn't watch for the signs, and what that did was led him to taking one wrong turn, which led him to making 100 miles in the wrong direction. We can often do that to our own people, where one slight, merge of a lane, and they keep going without asking clarifying questions, or we don't have our finger on the pulse of our people and they go 100 miles in the wrong direction. We get a slide deck, or we get a presentation, or we get a proposal that is not even close. It is, to borrow from Dumb and Dumber, the Samsonite of this whole scenario. I want to make sure that as leaders, I'm positioning you to make these micro adjustments in these conversations and being able to know what to watch for. As we're growing, as we're scaling, we are interviewing a lot of different candidates, a lot of different personalities. And something that I ask in my intro or discovery interview is, walk me through, what does your ideal environment look like? Now, if you've been listening for the last 5 to 10 minutes, you know I don't care about the answer to that question. I'm asking them to tell me who they are without saying, hey, who are you? Because most people don't know who they are in the first place. But based on how they describe the answer to this question, I can very easily put them in one of the 4 quadrants of the DISC assessment. And from there, as I'm walking them through my scorecard of questions, I'm listening for how are they aligned with their natural personality versus what are they positioning in the interview to get the quote-unquote right answer. So sometimes we need to look for, they're jumping to unrelated info. They're going to a comfort space. They're telling us that they don't know the answer to the question without telling us they don't know the answer to the question. Or they overuse buzzwords. This has been probably the last 7 years or so, but there is just an influx of incompetent people that buzzword themselves through a business meeting, and they say a lot of words. It's like the person that didn't study for the book report and then has to write a 10,000 word book report, and they only have 1,000 words to actually share of quality because they read the first paragraph of the book and the closing statements. And so they stretch that out using buzzwords and just hyperbole and these things that don't really make a whole lot of sense contextually. So what's your next move? The follow-up question. This is where the gold is, on the other side of that original question. So making a slight pivot and then a redirect. So that's helpful. What's something that was hard about that moment? I'm asking because, again, I don't get a lot of quality out of the answer to the opening question. The opening question is just to get them talking about the thing. And now I'm going to go into it. I'm going to restate it. Interesting. Would you mind going into a little deeper there? We want to get a little bit past the surface. One, this unearths competency for the task or the role of the task or the role that I'm interviewing for. If I leave that conversation in full confidence without getting a temperature check on the individual, we could find ourselves in that Lloyd Christmas type of situation where we're 100 miles in the middle of nowhere. We're trading our custom vehicle for a moped with great gas mileage. we need to have the ability and the confidence to ask the next question. It doesn't hurt to ask. And when we go into those next layer follow-up questions, we're starting to tease out these different elements of building context, unearthing character or lack thereof, context or competency behind what it is that we're asking them to do. When you say it went fine, what does that actually mean in your world? If you're being really honest with yourself, okay, fine, great, I understand. Those are all ways of saying, I don't actually think I understand, but I can't say I don't understand. But if we build into our culture this art of asking, I will tell you right now, I'm actually sitting at a client's office right now. We went through, and quite frankly, the growth over the last 12 months and the quality of conversations using these resources is unbelievable. Like, it's almost two different sets of people with very little physical turnover, meaning the quality of the conversations, the quality of the transactions that are going on in the business, and the ability for them to serve the customer well is is a 180 to where we started. These truly are about genuine sense of curiosity, and it's not fake it till you make it. It's really wanting to understand the people that are sitting in front of us. We want to tease that out. We want to do that in a way that comes across genuine. There's a curiosity to it. There's an unpacking and unearthing of the things that maybe they don't have the confidence to say, or maybe they don't feel that contextually you would be interested. I was on an interview yesterday, and it was interesting because the gal that I was talking to, very qualified, but having the question structured the way that I did, you could tell there was a genuine curiosity about where I was going with the question, because she had never been asked these questions in a sales interview. We have a tendency as interviewers, especially when it comes to a very transactional position or potentially transactional position of the sales representative or sales consultant or sales advisor, whatever you want to call them, there's a temptation to ask only sales questions. How many calls do you make in a day? If I asked you to make 200 calls, would you make them? Yes, of course. Both of those are really poorly worded questions. But when I flipped it on its head and I said, there's a lot of competing priorities as a salesperson. How do you structure your day to prioritize the right things? And what are the right things that you prioritize? I'm asking her to step into my environment in that question. I'm not saying, we make 200 phone calls a day here. Are you willing to do that? Yes, because the job that she wants is on the other side of that question. But when I make it about genuine connection, curiosity, and I want to understand this person, whether this is in an interview or I'm trying to get contextual understanding behind an activity or a task that maybe didn't go our way, or maybe it did, and I'm having a one-on-one with my team members, and I'm just wanting to understand. Would you mind going deeper about, okay, you did this thing, it worked out. What made you do that? What did you learn from when you did it? And what would make you do it again if given the opportunity? Silence is your secret weapon. I want to go a little bit deeper here because I know intellectually silence is uncomfortable. We are in a world, we are in a culture, we're in an environment where noise is the language, whether it's advertisements, social media, conversation, always having Spotify, or I'm going to date myself, but Pandora, whatever your thing is. I grew up in a house of 7 kids, 9 people under one roof in about 1,300 square feet. There was no lack of noise. And so when I actually had my first really 6 to 12 months outside of that, and I was on my own, the silence was deafening. I was very fortunate to live in a house with amazing acoustics. So I, being who I am, I sing, I hum really loud, and the house encouraged it because it had such great acoustics. Coming off of a vaulted roof, I could fill that place with noise. But I want to say all of this to say that noise might be the volume that distracts you from the answer. If you can master the pause and how silence is your secret weapon. After a strong question, silence isn't awkward. And I would challenge anybody that's on this training, practice silence. Allow the silence to speak. Allow it to be your leverage in a conversation. In a sales scenario, we always hear, he who speaks first loses. Why is it that we lose that art, that lesson when it comes to persuasion, of pulling people into a relationship, a conversation with us? Most people rush to fill that silence with noise, with filler words, with buzzwords, with things that they're comfortable with. Letting a pause hang encourages truth, depth, and honesty to rise up out of it. If you have kids or you've ever been with somebody that has a propensity to be a depraved human, and I say that because if you say that kids are genuinely born flawless, I can tell you that you've never had kids, because nobody teaches them how to lie, nobody teaches them how to deceive, no one teaches them how to bite or hit or punch or scratch, and yet they do it very naturally. I say that because if you have kids, and I'll use 18 and under, I've got 2 out of the house at 21 and 23, but for the 5 that are at home, they haven't picked up on it because I can't give away all my secrets. But when I ask a question and I sit in the silence, I just wait. Sometimes it's 3 seconds, sometimes it's 30 seconds. And when in doubt, wait it out. But I will just sit in that silence, and you wouldn't believe, or maybe you would if you've got kids and you've done this, the silence is talking to them way more than me alternating my strategy into yelling or screaming or going into a monologue of why they shouldn't have done the thing that they did. Sitting in that silence allows them to seep in the depravity of the moment, the lack of character that they have, but the character that I want them to have. The same thing is true with our team members, our coworkers, our partners. If we ask a question and we need transparency, we need to allow the silence to speak. After you ask a question, count to 3. 3 full beats. 1, 2, 3. In your head. Do this. Three stanzas. We're in marching band season right now, and so we talk in stanzas and bridges and all these metaphors. But each one of those is 4 beats. Give yourself a beat. Go through 4 beats. And if you can get through that measure and no one has spoken, there's been a lot that's been spoken through that silence. So the 3-beat method is ask a powerful question. Make sure that it's a powerful question, because you're going to be sitting in that. If you sit in that long enough, you will find that truth, context, and character will start to unearth itself. Master the pause and why silence is your secret weapon. It signals that you're serious about hearing their full answer. How many times are we guilty as managers, supervisors, and even a leader in asking a question, not getting the answer, and then immediately rephrasing the question as if there's a problem with the question versus allowing somebody to feel the wave of emotion that hits from a powerful, serious, gravitating question, letting them be thoughtful, listening for that pause. Are they being intentional with their answer? We're going to get higher level responses when we allow the question to sit and be effective. It gives them time to think beyond surface responses. We started out this conversation, this training, in not wanting to go a mile wide and a foot deep. We want to go a mile deep and maybe just 10 feet wide. But we're going to be able to unearth a lot of these values and abilities to integrate into our personal and professional life by utilizing these methods. It often invites more vulnerability because we're creating a space where it's not scripted, it's not a monologue, it's not even a back and forth ping pong match, which, again, talking about temptations, these are very tempting things. Is you say something, and as soon as you get done, I'm going to say something, and as soon as you say something, I'm going to say, and we just go back and forth, and we're not listening to the context and the gravity of what's being shared. We're simply listening for a moment to jump in with our answers or our opinions or both. The three beat method in action. Can you tell me about a mistake you made that changed how you lead? I'm waiting. I want them to have that time to process. They'll often share way more than what was in that question because the same thing is true. The reason we want to embrace that pause and get really good at mastering the pause, sitting in the silence. If we ask a question and we don't allow them to give us a genuine, authentic, well thought, intentional answer, we're going to miss a lot of opportunity. We're going to have a conversation, walk away from it, and not know exactly what the value of it was. In doing this for a decade and a half already, it feels like if I walk away from a conversation where I don't feel a connection, I don't unearth a lot of meaningful conversation, I can almost guarantee you, because of the type of person that I am, it's probably going to be the last conversation we have. If it's not the last, it's the first of a couple more qualifying conversations. We want to create a space of vulnerability. We want to, first, we talked about this last week. These quality questions creates an opportunity for vulnerability from our listener. We want to position or frame our questions with vulnerability, but then we want to create this space, this moment, these opportunities to have that same or greater sense of vulnerability with our people. You don't need a fancy script. Honestly, like, this is as clear as I can be. Just the courage to ask good questions and the discipline to wait and the wisdom to listen to what's not being said is going to be your silver bullet to your conversations. I get pushback, like I mentioned, about having scripted interviews, even having scripted conversations. The reality is that we have scripted conversations every day, and I'll give you an example. Honey, how was your day? How many times have we come home and we've asked our significant other, how was your day? Now, Do we care about the answer to that question? Yes, we do on the surface. But how they answer the question leads us to the next question. If our spouse, loved one, child, coworker, colleague says, "Oh man, my day was really hard. The kids were crazy." Or, "Oh my goodness, the customers that I had to serve today didn't seem to want to be happy." And then we just ask our next question of, "Well, you know, what's for dinner?" Or, "What are you going to do about it tomorrow?" And we don't ask a next follow up question to that. Again, we're going to stay in this surface level conversation that leads to surface level communication, that leads to surface level relationships. If we never get out of this, we will be a very transactional environment, very transactional culture, to where people will come, they'll go, nobody notices when people are hired, when they're exiting, and it's a highly transactional relationship. I don't know about you, but I want an environment where people have to heavily consider the value of leaving before they leave. Meaning there's a total compensation plan outside of salary that they have to consider. If I go to ABC School Supplies to take my career to the next level, I've got to give up leaders that care deeply about me, a culture that encourages creativity and design and the ability to have ambiguity but accountability all at the same time. I'm having to give up A, B, and C things, X, Y, and Z. I'm going to have to walk away from those things. I want a culture that's sticky for more than just the amount that they get in their bank account. I want the relationships to be deep. I want the roots to be deep. When a storm comes, difficult times come. If you're on the phase 4 calls yesterday, we talk about summits. So when we get to these summits, these hard places at the top, just before you get to the summit, that's the hardest place to hike in your growth and scaling journey. Once you get there, how's the dirt condition? How are the roots? Are everything in that relationship still intact? The 2-1 principle. We've heard it said you've got 2 ears, 1 mouth for a reason. And yet sometimes we forget, as I'll say as leaders, but I'll say more than that, organizational mouthpieces. A lot of times we excuse the fact that our creator gave us 2 ears, 1 mouth. This deceptively simple idea has deep leadership and communication impacts, not just out of politeness, which it is polite, I'm not going to get away from that, but as a strategic choice in persuasion, hiring, negotiation, and leadership. The reality of our situation is when we become the leader, we assume the mantle in many instances that we are the smartest ones in the room. Sometimes we even feel like we have to have answers to questions we've never heard. It's not about being able to ask or answer all of the questions our people might ask. It's about being vulnerable, being able to ask questions into that. As a leader, your leverage doesn't come from having all of the answers to all of the things. You today might be answering $1 and $5 million revenue questions operationally and culturally as you scale and grow, whether that's growing in your people count, your people culture, your people in just their ability to lead themselves and others. You might be growing in your revenue generation and then having to operationalize the new revenue problems, meaning you have to deliver on new contracts and higher level contract value. Your ability to answer all those questions is not a barometer on your ability to lead or be a leader. but from being able to draw out truth, alignment, and insight from others, being able to ask questions into it. Hey, Kirk, I know you're asking this, and I know you need clarity. I don't have it right now. But what I will do is I will go seek it out. But before I seek it out, I want to get your feedback. When you ask that question, what perspective are you coming from? Have you worked out some potential solutions? We talk about it often internally. I don't present any problems that I haven't already worked out, a handful of solutions or possible solutions. And then as a leadership team or as a leader, I'll go to AJ and I'll say, hey, these are the challenges that I'm having. Here's a handful of solutions to each one of these challenges. Let's work through this together and find solutions, find a move forward strategy for each one of this. I think if we can create cultures where people not only feel more inclined to ask questions, not only of leadership, but of situations, we create an opportunity for our people to do less problem or challenge or negativity identification and be more solution identifiers, be more solution oriented, be more positive in their approach to not only their personal outlook, but their professional outlook. Be solution geniuses, if you will, to where we're starting to train up people on how to create the solution that they want to see versus just identify the problem that they're not willing to solve. So, most people talk to convince instead of listening to learn. I would say most people also interrupt to respond instead of pausing to reflect. How many times are we guilty of answering a question impulsively and then 2 days later we have time to reflect or think through what we said in the moment, and then we have to go back and retract that answer or redirect because we just sent somebody in a right turn versus a left turn and we don't want them to go 100 miles out of the way. We rush the dialogue. I've got a meeting to be in 5 minutes. I need to get this off my plate instead of making space for clarity. How do you do this pragmatically? I often had to navigate this in previous experiences and even do it now because, as a startup, we're wearing multiple hats. Right now, I'm sitting in 3 different seats and I'm okay with that. But what that does put a restraint on is my physical chronological time. So if AJ or Heather or one of the other team members comes to me and says, hey, I need to talk about this, and I've got, let's say, 3 minutes to answer this question, I'm not going to engage in that conversation. But what I will do is I will leverage that moment for a future acquisition of time. So, Kirk, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. I want to work through this with you. I don't have time right now, but what I do have is at 3:30, at 4 o'clock, at 5:30. What I'm willing to do is stay after to make sure that we have clarity going into tomorrow so you can take action on this thing. And then I'm asking them, hey, take a look at my schedule and put 15 minutes on our time together. And then do me a favor, in the description of the invite, can you just lay out 3 possible solutions that you've worked out to this challenge so I can work through that before and maximize our time with each other? It's as easy. I didn't actually answer the question. I didn't solve the problem. But what I did do is I elevated their importance. I gave them vulnerability into my own limitations, time in this case. But then what I also did was I gave them clarity on next steps. We walked away from that interaction with clear line of sight on what is downrange for what we're going to do together. Ask questions. Stop talking. Don't answer your own question. Don't fill the silence. Let the people fill the space with what's on their mind. This is, again, a temptation that we all face as high dominant personalities or very influential type people that speak in story form. We have the natural inclination to fill the silence. Don't do it. Listen for understanding, not for your turn to speak. A lot of times we find ourselves guilty, and if you reflect on even this morning's conversation inside of your environment, how many times did you listen to the first part of the question or the comment or the statement only to start formulating your answer prior to the end or the period that they presented to you? Practice mirror listening. I alluded to this with a former leader that I loved her communication. She taught me a lot. We worked on DISC quite a bit. We worked on benchmarking teams a lot. And this is one of those tools that I would say she's especially gifted at, but mirror listening. Instead of preparing your reply, try to repeat back what you heard before responding. So if I heard you right, the main issue isn't the task itself. It's the unclear expectations, correct? Tell me what you really need. Reveal what's working and what's not. Feel respected and open to influence. When we simply restate the question one, they might have asked it in haste, knowing that we're a busy person. If we restate the question in that mirror listening, hey, this is what I heard you say. Is that what you meant to say, or is there something I'm missing? Reflect back on that, allow them to see the vulnerability in it, but then allow them the space and the latitude to correct any misheard expectations. And then use the follow-up to gain depth. I cannot stress this enough. Don't move on too quickly from your original question to just get through your list of questions, quote unquote. A single follow-up question can unlock depth that you don't even know exists. Sometimes it's asking that necessary next layer of question, sitting in the silence, and then stacking our questions. That's interesting. What made you choose that approach at that time? Leaders are listeners. If you hear nothing else from this conversation, from this session of Business Builders, leaders are listeners first. If you want better answers, be kind, be the kind of leader who listens like it's your job, like it depends on it, because it does. Your ability to lead people well is completely predicated on your ability to listen to people well. The better a listener you become, the better question asker you become. And the better the question, the better the leader. So with that, I know we're at time, but I want to jump in and just give you a reflective activity. So look into your mind, or maybe a physical document that you have at your ready. Rewrite the yes, no, maybe questions. If you can answer any of your questions, whether it's in a one-on-one format, a disciplinary journey format, or an interview format, if any of your questions can be answered with yes, no, maybe, instead of an open-ended one that starts with what, why, when, where, how, walk me through it. Help me understand. Rewrite those questions. They can be asking the same thing a different way, but the quality goes up. And then reflect and restructure. Reconstruct a failed conversation or interview using better structured questions. If you're like us, we record all of our interviews, all of our meetings. It's very easy to pull those things down. Look at the Read AI. We want to leverage technology, but do that in a way that allows you to reflect on those conversations, allows you to see where you could have modified poorly worded questions, and give yourself permission when you start to feel yourself in those moments asking a poorly worded question. Like, if you could do X, would you do X? That's a bad question because it can be answered with yes, no, or maybe. A better question would, if you had this opportunity, walk me through how you would handle this and what impact it would have on your work. I'm requiring them to unearth based on their competence to deliver on the objective that I need delivered. I hope this conversation was helpful. I hope it was impactful. I I want this bigger conversation of really interviewing like your job depends on it, because it does, to really be a series of events that really tailor the next 6 months of what you do as a leader, how you approach the opportunity to lead people well. But ultimately, I want us all to walk away from these with the ability to have greater conversations. I appreciate you joining us. I do want to, for the live viewer, open it up for any follow up questions that you may have. Awesome. Well, I am going to take that as positive feedback in sitting in the silence. Again, I hope this is valuable. I hope it changes the way that you have conversations both in and out of your house, in and out of your business, and really gives you tools and resources to unearth some of those deeper elements of a relationship that, whether short term or long term, can be kind of just what it is. But there's always something new to discover in that dynamic of people, and that's pretty amazing to me. Awesome. Well, you guys have a great afternoon. Stay thirsty, my friends, on this Stay Thirsty Thursday. We'll see ya.